Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. We are worldwide today for our webinar, Optimizing Lean with AI and Performance-Driven Techniques, presented by our esteemed panel here. They'll be introducing themselves in just a minute. I'm Eileen Goldberg with LCI, and I'll be, I guess, your master of ceremonies today, since the panel will be moderated by Jessica Arala from BuildUts. There's a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to go over before we get started. The first is this is being recorded, and a copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent out to all participants by close of business tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. You'll notice the long skinny box on the right-hand side of your screen, that's the control panel. There's a red arrow to the left of that box, that's the minimization and maximization arrow for that panel. Please feel free to use that throughout the presentation so you can view the presentation more closely. At the bottom of your control panel, you'll see the questions box. If you have any questions, please put them in that box, and I will be feeding them through to Jessica, and she will be asking them to the panel as we go through the presentation. We're also going to be doing a quick plus delta at the end of the presentation. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term, pluses are things you thought added value to the presentation, and deltas are things you think we should change to add more value to the presentation. In the spirit of lean and continuous improvement, we absolutely want to make sure our webinars are exactly what you'd like to hear about. I also want to let you know this is a very interactive webinar. There are several polls. So as we go through, if you are in a group setting, please take the consensus of the group and vote that way. Just a quick recap, this is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to everybody by close of business tomorrow. You see the control panel with the minimization and maximization arrow. Please feel free to use that throughout the present so you can view the presentation more closely. And remember, the questions box, please put any questions you have in there and be thinking about that feedback as we go through, because we absolutely want to know what it is that you have to think about what it is that we present. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen, and hello, everybody. We're really excited to have you on this webinar today with this amazing panel that we have brought to you. And just as a recap, as everybody's coming into the room, we just wanted to do a recap of what the webinar is about today. And what we're going to focus on is enhancing lean project delivery by integrating our favorite buzzword of 2024, artificial intelligence, data, and performance-driven methodologies. We're also going to delve into how performance-driven construction management methodology complements Lean's core principles of fostering culture of respect for people, obviously continuous improvement, maximizing value by streamlining processes and reducing waste. We're going to explore how performance-driven data aligns with the tenets of Lean construction to help teams proactively tackle and overcome project challenges. It's going to be a great discussion today. I fully expect the panelists to really give us a run for our money and to have some really rich discussion. So with that, I'm going to pass it over and have our panelists introduce themselves. And Jeremy, you're up here in the top left. How about you go first?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeremy Cortizio, a project executive with Skanska. I've been in the industry for almost 25 years now, and I think what I'm most passionate about is figuring out how to make construction an industry where people enjoy coming to work and to enhance people's retention of employees. I'll pass it over to Kyle.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, and good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Nitchin. I'm a senior project manager with Layton Construction, and I am overseeing and manage the healthcare work in our Southern California business unit. Very passionate about the industry. Been doing this about a little over 10 years and excited to help lead the next generation, the next wave of tools, techniques, and tactics to deliver successful projects. Thank you. I'll pass it over to you, Chris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Vine. I'm a project superintendent with Hensel Phelps, based in Phoenix, Arizona. I have been practicing lean officially, I guess, about the same as Kyle, a little over 10 years. Unofficial lean practices going back since I began my career in 2000, but excited to be here and help share some insights today.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. I'm going to pass it over to Andy Steele.
So hello from me. I'm on the other side of the pond, so it's sort of late afternoon for us at the moment. So we're covering a few time zones, which is excellent. So I'm Chief Strategy Officer at BuildOps. We're a construction technology business, focuses largely on progress tracking. My background, though, is, embarrass myself, 40 years, give or take, in and around the construction industry. Previous role to BuildOps was Group Chief Exec of a construction and development company here in the UK, top 40, approximately 1,200 staff. And on top of that was chair of the largest trade federation, looking after the construction industry's voice here in the UK. So we're excited to be on the panel. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. And I'm your moderator, Jessica Harala. I actually spent the majority of my life in industry. So I was at Skanska, Walsh, and Clayco before I decided to join construction technology. I've done that very intentionally because I really believe that there is a better way to build the ship, and more importantly, a better and easier and less stressful way for us all to make money. And I really believe technology is the way to do that. And I'm really, really excited today to talk about how data can help us do those things. Data can really help us build smarter, build better, and give us a little less gray hair. But it might be too late for Chris to say.
Or no hair.
So with that, let's jump into a couple of poll questions. And Eileen, if you could, I'm gonna guess you stop. I can stop sharing, and you.
You don't need to. You don't need to. I just popped up the poll.
Okay, amazing. So our first poll question is, what percentage of construction projects typically finish behind schedule? So everybody can put those poll questions in, those answers.
All right, we've got some answers piling in here. We're going to leave the poll open for a little bit longer just to see how many more we can get. Thank you so much.
I'll be really curious the answer to this, because I think the answer that I thought was not the answer that it is, but maybe it's just me being, naive or always thinking positively that we can always do things better than we do. But let's throw it up there, Eileen.
All right, here we go. Going to close the poll, share the results with everyone. We had a close one, 50%, 75 or more. 47% said between 25 and 50%, and 3% said less than 25%.
Yeah, I think the answer is 75% or more, so the majority wins. I'm curious, Chris, as a superintendent, how you feel about this poll result?
It's certainly indicative of the industry standard. I think each of us have over the years learned how to navigate the challenges, and this panel for sure represents some companies that would not be in that norm. But yeah, it is the standard, and it is something that we, even as a general contractor, we struggle and we support the trades that might not have have had that support in the past to be able to deliver on that timeline. And so that's kind of what we do, is help navigate that and get everybody done on time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kyle, what are your thoughts on that poll? Did that surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me. I'm pretty well read on the data, and unfortunately, we don't have the biggest success record, and that's, in my opinion and my perspective, is these things are challenging. These are very complex projects that we build, and accomplishing the building challenges is hard. And I think when we talk about a little more in this webinar is what are those gaps, and how can we improve those numbers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to move on to the next poll, and we'll jump in with some more discussion after that. So in your experience, what's the primary cause of delays in construction projects? This one's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to this one too. Let's see, we're distributing the poll, and the poll is open. Go ahead and put those. Okay, there's a front runner here. We'll have to see if it stays a front runner, but there's a big one.
Okay.
Yep. Let's see. We're going to wait until a little more percentage of the votes come in. Oh, wait. Okay. We'll leave the poll open for another couple seconds since they're coming in a pretty big clip.
Excellent, excellent. What's your guess on this, Jeremy? What do you think's going to come up?
I would say a lot of people are probably going to guess weather conditions, but I suspect the data might show something different.
All right, we ready?
We're ready.
Jeremy, I have to laugh. 6% said weather conditions.
Oh, wow. Wow.
59%. 59% said project hiccups, resource use, and trade partner sync issues. 34% said scope changes. That actually surprised me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The answer is definitely B, so yay to the majority who selected that. Yeah, it's funny. In fact, 56% of project delays and issues on the site are caused by hiccups, as we call them, challenges on site. And does that shock you at all, Chris?
No, excuse me, no, it doesn't. At the end of the day, our job as a general contractor is to coordinate a whole lot of teammates. And so we use lean principles and lean practices that help us facilitate that. And it has improved over time in doing so. And I think everybody on this panel can say, hey, the more I learned, the more I applied that, the more I implemented it, the better things got. Some of us did it longer and called it something else, but now it's got a formal name. And I think we're all excited about helping push it forward and bring it to more people and more trades.
Absolutely. And Andy, in your vast experience of construction, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like that's a pretty accurate representation?
I think if the industry is honest with itself, and it appears that people on this call are being honest, which is great. Yeah, it's the project that helps. I think we're quite conditioned to try and justify ourselves along the way as to why the project's late. So, you know, I come from a commercial background, so my art was always trying to find reasons why, of course, it wasn't us. So, you know, whether design, scope changes by the customer. But realistically, yeah, these are complex projects. It's not.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and throw up the third poll, Eileen.
All right, the third poll is being distributed here. I'm looking forward to this answer too, actually.
Yeah, so what do you estimate is the total annual cost of the global construction industry due to unproductivity? It's funny, Andy and I were talking about this whole question before we got on the call, and I'm like, I think I know that answer, but like that also seems crazy. So how are the responses coming in, Eileen?
Oh, there's a front runner.
Okay.
There's a good one here. Let's see. Still getting answers at a pretty fast clip. We'll leave it open for another couple seconds. Again, if you are in a group, please take the consensus of the group and vote that way. All right, here we go. We're going to close the poll, share the results with everyone. Well, no one said less than 500 million.
Well, that's good. That's good. And as Andy told me, the answer is actually over 1.6 trillion. So just, you know, what's 100 billion between friends, right? But yeah, we have a huge industry. We have a huge responsibility to the world to build what society needs, right? And I think there's so much that we are giving up, right? And in the world, we are giving up our own fees of being unproductive. And Kyle, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a big number. That's a big number. And yeah, I think right along those lines of the last questions, it's easy for us to think that these losses and unproductivities coming from something outside, like a scope change or weather conditions. But no, it's the stuff that's happening internally in the project, the lack of collaboration, communication, things of that nature, things that are happening amongst the group. Those are the challenges. So I think if we can fix those and operate off of data and good information, we can lower those numbers, lower those losses.
It's such good insight, and it really goes into the next question that I wanted to pose to the team, which is, what are the biggest challenges you feel like the construction industry is facing right now? And Kyle, I know you mentioned communication internally, is a huge piece, right? And that collaboration between not just our own project team, but the entire larger project team with the designers and the trade partners and everybody. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that one of the biggest challenges the industry has is finding skilled people to help manage and work in the industry. And I think it really ties to what we're talking about today because, as I mentioned earlier, I think that a lot of times we find ourselves in very stressful situations in construction. And I think we can help that as a management team by incentivizing people to plan and track things in a way that focuses people, their energy in the front end of projects versus kind of firefighting when things actually do pop up.
That's right. That's right. Chris, any other additional thoughts from you?
No, I agree. It's human resource limitations, just the quantity, and how do we be more efficient? Whether you believe in your soul that you need to be on site for 14 hours a day, great, then get more done. If you believe that you should try to get out of work by 3, 4, 5 o'clock, then be more efficient and get enough done to do so. And so we don't have enough craft, we don't have enough salary. It's just industry gap, which is great. I mean, industry is booming, but we need more people.
Sure.
Or we need.
And I find so much, especially when we're talking about efficiencies of construction, I find so much that I tell people we made it through COVID, but now it's 2024. And guess what? Nobody wants to work in a metal trailer 14 hours a day. Those days are over for us as an industry. Whether you say fortunately or unfortunately, I think those days are over. So what are we doing as an industry to incentivize people to come into our industry and stay in our industry, of working smarter? And Kyle, have you thought about that in your business? I mean, in your day-to-day, you're having to manage the comings and goings of project teams all the time. Or do you feel like they're asking for more technology? What do you feel like they're asking for to stay motivated and want to work?
Yeah, I think it's a two-part deal. Technology is definitely a big component. The generation behind us or that's coming in to the industry, they're very tech savvy. They want to see the tools and the systems that are happening out there and how you're using them. So I think that that's a big component is adopting a good technology stack, blending it in with your processes and communicating it, showing that to the next generation. And then it's training, showing that next generation how they fit into the bigger picture, how they're contributing to the team. What is the process? Why are you reviewing this submittal? Why are you reviewing this RFI? You're writing it like this. So that's on us as leaders to kind of communicate that and make sure people understand how they fit into the picture. But those are the two big things that I see.
Two big things, yeah, I totally agree. And Andy, you made the jump, of course, from construction to technology. So what did you find to be the most challenging thing that the industry was facing that made you switch to technology?
I mean, I can be slightly provocative now and actually say, as I say, been around the industry for 40 years. Fundamentally, the business model is pretty broken. What we're trying to do is absolutely incredible, and it's no reflection on the amazing people that we have in the industry, because boy, they do some absolutely, stunning projects and buildings, and it is so much part of our life. I always describe it as like the second most important industry behind food, but that's because I like food. But it's not a reflection on what people are doing. It's just a reflection on how we've ended up structuring our industry and the problems that we have. And obviously attracting people is gaining a lot of momentum into it. But I think that's a big problem. But I think it's more systemic than that. I think we've got to really look at some of the root causes behind it and the relationship between, and I know there's a number of owners on the call here, and it's the relationship between all the stakeholders in these projects, and actually find some better common ground. So to me, the industry is what I describe as VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. It's a very difficult world to be in, but there's some great opportunities. And to be honest, I'm still around because I love it. And why technology? Because I think it can really help. It's as simple as that. You know, I'm here because I believe we can make a difference. And I think everyone on the call, we're all driven to deliver these projects.
Yeah. Well, let's jump a little bit into lean. And I think this is all really good information. And, you know, based on what we're talking about today, how do you see lean help drive performance? You know, the entire lean mindset, how do you use that to drive performance today? Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's the improvement in collaborative coordination. So, I mean, you can talk about respect for people, you can talk about continuous improvement, and I think inherently, the people on this call that I've spoken with, we grew up that way. That's just how our companies treat people well and try to get better every day. So then you kind of evolve into or stretch that into some of the other tenets of lean. But at the end of the day, if we are working together to optimize the whole and taking care of each other, trying to get better every day, we're going to perform better and turn projects over in a better way and have more fun doing it.
Right, right. Jeremy, do you have differing thoughts? Are you on the same page?
Yeah, I think as it relates to lean, from what I've seen, I've worked on quite a few projects, you know, maybe they had an IFOA and then projects that were more, you know, hard bid or traditional delivery. And what I see is that how we incentivize people to measure how things are going. I can compare it to, I recently got a new toothbrush, and I promise you this does relate. And this toothbrush, it's great. The battery lasts for like 2 weeks, but you know, on the day that it needs charged, boom, it's out. And so I kind of compare that to how some people measure how they're doing on a project, right? Versus, hey, we all get in a car and we measure gasoline, or, you know, a lot of people measure their battery nowadays. You have a really good idea, especially now, like how far you can go, you know, when you need to fill up with gas or recharge. I think that our industry can do better. Even projects that have used a lot of lean principles, have a lot of collaboration, a lot of people are still using some pretty old tired metrics that still incentivize us to react versus plan ahead. And so that's probably the best way I can explain my view on it.
Through the lens of a toothbrush. I like it.
That's right.
I like it. Sometimes you got to take our minds out of the world of construction and throw it in there. And Kyle, you're a huge lean advocate. You have a podcast. Tell us your thoughts about how lean can really drive performance on sites.
Yeah, based on our job sites, we're doing anything we can to fix those three issues that we're talking about: poor planning, poor collaboration, and poor communication. So we're going to be introducing any process that brings collaboration together and communication. Last planner system, managing the data that comes out of the last planner system. We're doing anything to minimize waste, maximize value, waste walks, 5S, these kind of principles we're bleeding into our work, and picking up as much data as we can through these processes. And so we're introducing any of that just to address those three big issues
Those
and bring
three big things.
Yeah.
Those are big issues to tackle for sure, and I commend you for trying to give it everything you have every day to that. So I want to, based on that, it's a good segue to move into this data discussion, right? And we're going to hear from Andy here in a little bit about how AI can drive that. But Eileen, if you could throw up our next poll about data, because you know, this industry has long been short on data. So I'm curious from this panel and from the attendees, how data-driven is the lean construction industry today?
Okay, the poll's being distributed. Lots of votes coming in. Again, there is a front runner. Is there a front runner? There is a front runner on this one. I'm curious to know what you guys think it is.
Yeah, really would like to hear from the panelists. Where do you think this is going to hit?
Slightly.
Yeah. I mean, it depends a little bit on who's taking the poll, but slightly would be my guess too.
Yeah.
Okay, if slightly is everybody's guess, we're going to go ahead and close the poll, share the results with everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, moderately is the winner.
Moderately.
Moderately.
Wow.
Slightly coming up right under that.
Everybody's, and maybe everybody on this call is very data driven, but I would definitely say, from my experience and along with the panelists, that slightly is really probably where it sits most. But I think part of the reason for that is we just haven't had a mechanism to get the data, right? It's all so manual. So how have you overcome that to date of using the data when you can use the data? Where does it come from? You know, how are you getting it? Do you find it useful even though you have to do a lot of manual work with it? Anybody jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in just on my projects, how we're using data. The best is obviously with technology. So one of my favorites is like anytime you're doing like a pull planning, using a digital pull planning tool. Usually a lot of these tools, they track your PPC, your percent plan complete. That is a really good one to use as a metric to make performance-driven decisions. Others, it's a little bit more manual, but TACT planning. It's another great one to use for tracking production and your pace, which is the key metric there. What kind of pace to fulfill the demand of your schedule? Because I think that's the one big missing component there, that the industry is very schedule driven. We're very schedule driven, and what I mean by that is that the who does what by when. That's like the demand of the project, but we don't really get into the how that fulfills the demand. There's a big gap there. And so when you look at you want to get data that shows you the underlying behavior of your systems that meet the demand of your schedule. So I think that's the big, pillar there that's missing and crucial for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, what are your thoughts there?
That was well said. Good job, Kyle. But years ago, a simple trend chart. How many blocks did you lay today? How many blocks do you lay tomorrow? You know, and you trend these things, and you have a line that's created based on your schedule duration and your total block count, for example. And you can tell if you're above or below the line, if you're ahead or behind pace. You know, lean brought us to the things that Kyle talked about. I mean, we're all into drones and laser scanning and figuring out ways for AI to go tell us how many feet of this got done and not have to go. I mean, my example, we had to go count it. There wasn't another way to figure it out. So as we learn to accept these new technologies and we learn to implement them in an efficient way, we're helping people be more efficient. And that ultimately should lead to respect for people, quality of life, you know, all the kinds of things that we want to give our people and still be top-notch builders.
Yeah. So Jeremy, question for you, you know, unlike other industries, and there's lots of industries that rely very much on performance indicators for improvement, right? Very much so. Where do you think we're falling short in adapting that similar approach? Do you think we're just too far set in our ways? Like, where do you think we fall short on that?
I think that, I think we use metrics of, hey, I think I'm about 50% complete. And it's interesting because on the last IFOA project I was on, I mean, we're all tied into the same profit pool. And so our MEP partners are very important, right? Their productivity and their awareness on, you know, how many mistakes are being made And so it was interesting to understand how they measure their own production and which things matter the most and which things are easy to get over. So as an example, some of the electrical trades are, seeing conduit go in, that's pretty easy to measure, right, visually. But, when you're pulling wire, making connections, there's a lot of steps in our business that are difficult to measure and difficult to assess quickly out in the field. And, we're talking about AI today. So you think about how technology is now integrated into our buildings more and more. Some of the steps that cause, large failures on projects are related to technology, where you have to tie a lot of these systems together in a building management system, tracking systems. And so you have a programming step. And what we're seeing is there's a lot of clients that use a very high level of security where they don't want to allow people onto their network. And that's required to get some of these key steps done at the end that, hey, you may get everything in place, but to tie it all in and test it can become a challenge at the end.
Yeah, Andy, any thoughts on what he's saying there?
Well, as I say, buildings are getting complicated. And obviously, the more technology, the more we're generating, the more complicated it is. And this is a game, it's a developing area. So where we can use AI today isn't necessarily going to answer all the problems that we have got. But we'll come on to how accurately the human can do it in a minute when we start to talk about performance-driven construction management and how that works.
Yeah. What do you feel like the metrics are if we're starting to talk about performance indicators? What are those metrics that you feel like are most impactful for day-to-day management on the projects today, right? Like not necessarily the performance indicators, but we call them metrics. Chris, what are those metrics that you're working with today that call it a successful project for you?
Well, I think Kyle touched on a couple. I mean, PPC obviously is one. We obviously have safety metrics. We have quality metrics. One that we haven't talked about is constraint management. And that's a pretty solid indicator for us in terms of how early do I identify the constraint? How early do I clear the constraint in advance of when I need it cleared? And so if you can keep that in like a 2-week-ish window, then you're not putting out fires. You're identifying problems. You're fixing them down the road. Obviously commitments. The whole thing is about commitments at the end of the day. So whether it's RFIs, whether it's submittals, whether it's getting the work done in area 2, whether it's getting that material delivered in time, all those things are tracked. And any way that Andy and Bill Dotz and different people can help improve that data collection and that data assimilation and feedback on what it means, the root cause of some of those things is going to be welcomed by the industry.
Yeah. What about you, Kyle? Metrics that you're really focused on that show you performance today?
Yeah. Chris mentioned a bunch of them already. PPC, constraint management, constraint logs, production pace, return visits, and work in process. Your overall amount of work in process is an important leading indicator for many things. But yeah, commitments. Anytime you can track commitments, do it, because if you make enough commitments and you fulfill your promises, you're going to fulfill your project. That's what it comes down to.
Amen to that. Seems so simple, right? Seems like it's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, I think we've had a lot of discussion and we've heard a lot about metrics and these performance indicators, which I think is great, and really the need to be more data driven. So I'm going to pass it over to you to talk a little bit about this performance driven construction management approach. Like, what does that mean to us? What does it look like? How can it help the industry?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'd just like to thank everybody because you've just teed me up superbly. Okay, unscripted, we've all come up with those individual answers, and I couldn't have asked for better. So let's just take a bit of a step back, and then I'll throw up some information. So what we're talking about within what we do is basically it's AI. We've talked about that. It's computer vision, so it's video, it's imagery, which automatically generates, and these are the key words, accurate, unbiased data, which is then presented in actionable metrics so that you and your teams can make key decisions. So this isn't anything which goes against what we talk about with lean principles. It is completely complementary to what you're talking about with lean. And that's the beauty of what I'm hearing. So in very simple terms, can people see that?
You certainly do. Thank you.
Excellent. So, here's a real shocker for you. Performance-driven construction management is a term that we try to adopt really in a way to articulate to the industry that we're trying to do something different. And I think we have to do that. I think we have to do that in the same way as lean has had to do that. Articulate it, demonstrate that it is something which is not critical of what has happened today, because this was not possible. And that's the point. Without this technology, the ability to capture that data at a level that we're now capturing it hasn't been there. And the human is not capable. And the number of tasks that we've now got on projects is enormous. You know, I've literally been talking about a project today where they've got 900 rooms in a very complex control tower. And they are sitting there going, we have no way of actually understanding exactly what tasks have been completed or not completed in this project without a huge amount of resource to do it. We just talked about resource. So Jeremy set up beautifully about the fact that, you know, it's about 50%, you know, that's how we work as humans. It's about. Well, actually, in what we're doing nowadays, it can't be about, it's just about. So what we're using is obviously performance-driven. The concept, no shock here, is about continuous improvement. So we measure something, we identify what's causing the issue, and that comes back to the metrics that we just talked about, and then we optimize it and we remeasure it. That's the very simple part of it. So what we're doing is we're measuring the building aspects. So we just talked about a point in time measurement is the starting point. And when we started this journey back in, you know, the technology we've been using for a few years, but when we started really trying to unearth what the benefits of the system were, is that we basically created a white paper about the inefficiencies that took place on building projects. And inefficiencies come back to some of the metrics you've been talking about, but the inefficiencies were how much of the building that's available to be built are we typically using and working on. And those metrics from all of the studies of all the projects that we were working on was somewhere about 40-odd%, 46%. Now that means there's 54% of available workplaces that we're not working on. Now, all the construction people out there will be saying, yeah, but there are reasons why. And of course there are reasons why, but it's unearthing what are those reasons and which ones we can manage and do something about using all the lean principles. So that was a starting point. It also looked at, you'll be stunned to know, PPC. PPC, those who practice lean will know straight away that it's not a shock to hear that, you know, somebody actually telling you what they're going to do next week and what they actually are delivering is somewhere in the order of 35 to 40% on typical, unless you start to adopt lean principles and then you start to drive that figure up. And that's the one that shocks me the most, is that if they can't tell you what they're going to do next week, how do we actually gain the commitments that we've just talked about? Cars is beautifully brought up. How do we actually gain those commitments? How do we actually understand those issues? So it's bringing that sort of data into place. and presenting it in a way that shows you from the data, because it's accurate data, as I say, it shows you exactly what the commitments were and what you've actually delivered against those commitments. Referring it back to the schedule and referring it back to actual pace on site. So it's literal data coming back, but presented in a way, and it's captured in a way that nobody can argue. There's no grayness to this. So when you're sat in the trailer having those weekly, daily huddle meetings, you're talking on facts. And if it's disputed, you can just look on the system. You don't even have to go out on site and challenge it. You can look on the system, you can look at the information, and you can actually see this level of data which shows what should have been worked on, when it should have been worked on, how much of it is actually being done. That's the basis of it. Bear with me 1 second.
Technology, eh?
We're a tech company. What happens? Yeah.
Well, while Andy's working on advancing that, what are your thoughts about the automation of PPC and using AI to measure this productivity and pace analysis? Is that something, Chris, you think that on site, that the site team would trust using AI to get this information?
I think I'm not aware of any inherent distrust in AI. If we're performing and doing our own PPC on site, I mean, we're still using a computer. I mean, we're calculating, we're not doing this with a chalkboard. And so to have a smarter, faster computer, or a different way of capturing this, but we need data, but we need to use the data appropriately and help that facilitate the conversations and the root cause analysis and the issues that we can go identify and then fix because AI told us what was broken.
Yeah. And would these leading indicators that we're kind of seeing, would that really help you with to drive lean project delivery? Kyle, I know you talked about leading indicators earlier. Are these the kind of leading indicators you're talking about?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. These would help. These help illuminate issues and help find root causes, which is lean as it gets.
Yeah. Sorry, Andy.
It's perfect. You filled in superbly. It's almost helped a lot and smoothed it over. So we just talked in general terms about which part of the process this is best fitted, and I think it was really great to see the polls coming in. I think it showed 59% of the is caused by the project delivery itself. I think that's very honest, and that's the bit that we're really focused on. Obviously there are scope changes and those sides which come into play, and we can't deny that. And we're not trying to say this is going to eliminate all delays. That's not something that. But what we're trying to do is make it leaner, more efficient, more effective. Now, having got that beautifully moved on to this, here we go. So what we can show is we can show actual pace. And that's, if you actually really understand what's going on in the project at that level of detail, so you can actually see with accurate data how they are against their schedule. That's the simplest thing. Slow pace, straight away. We can come on to some really interesting case studies later about how this can be developed even further beyond just this very simplistic view of they're not delivering in accordance with the pace that we require against the schedule. Sequence breaks. One of the lean principles obviously is all about the fact that you've got to make efficient use of resources. And here, what we see is where there's a stop in the sequence and they're having to return in areas or they're moving into into areas that they shouldn't have been working in necessarily, we have a major impact on the delays in that project. And that again is, data that you can only get by looking at where resources are, where they're working, and how frequently they're working. And one of the greatest ones is obviously, a habit of trades is they like to do the easier parts, the meat of the project, and leave the more complicated bits till later. We pick that up. We actually identify which tasks are left incomplete, how much of they are, where they are, how often they're returning into that area. And we do it for every trade. And that's the key. So you're getting all of this tracking information, because not all of these issues are going to hit your critical path all the time. But it is really important to get that understanding of exactly how it's all going to work and all pulled together. We were talking about a customer today that has written to us really great response saying, you identified early that the drywaller was going to be 6 weeks late, and we believe that saved us 2 weeks on our actual critical path and our end date. So recognizing it was not going to be ultimately 6 weeks, but we picked that up earlier through this pace control and outer sequence working. So it's that level of detail that we're looking at. What's the difference between traditional performance-driven? I say performance-driven we've coined from other industries, just trying to get people to think in that way, which is we're here to improve productivity, performance on the project. And we all know at the moment, and as I say, it's no criticism of what people are doing, we know that the indicators that we can get on site are typically lagging indicators. They're counted, they're a point in time. What they're not doing is they're not giving us the sensitivity, they're not really demonstrating what the true trends are, what the performance and productivity rates are. That's the real nuggets. The real thing is about pace control. It's about what we do now. Our latest feature is about delay forecasting, to actually understand how late that trade will be so that you can put in place the resolution to those issues now. And that is only being created, as I say, through the AI and the ability to do predictive forecasting. It's a very much more a proactive approach, building on the information you've got, enjoying the principles of your PPC, enjoying the principles of your hubs, enjoying your last planning concepts. All of those things come into play. Still got to get everybody to work together on a project. I heard a real horror story today, which was that a specialist contractor asked for a copy of the project schedule and was told no, all they would be given is their trade milestones, which didn't show when hoists were going to become available, when the whole thing was going to become available. It was such a, to me, naive way of looking at how you do a building and completely against everything to do with lean principles. This is all about creating transparency so better decisions can be made and more predictable outcomes. And as I say, we've got a number of owners on the call. It's about you understanding what the implications of the decisions on the site are being made and what the impact those are going to have on you as the owner as early as possible so that something can be done about it within the project or outside of the project. And it's an ultimate collaboration tool, and that's the beauty. Collaboration, working together. It's a tough enough industry as it is. We don't need to be fighting and blaming each other. Contracts do that enough, but within our projects, we need to find the best way. And we all know the best way is teamwork and put together. It just builds on that. And we'll talk about this slide later on anyway, so we'll come back to
that. Yeah, I'll just stop you there for a second, Andy, and kind of go to the panel here. Can you go back to the last slide? That would be helpful. Jeremy, what are your thoughts about this performance-driven construction management thought process and how that could augment the lean principles that we build on, respect for people and eliminating waste and continuous improvement in construction projects? Do you look at some of these and think to yourself like, yeah, this totally aligns and would help me?
Yeah, no, I think there are definitely scopes of work in each phase of the project where this could help maybe focus the amount of time, because you have a limited amount of time and energy of the team, maybe focus it on how to improve what's going on versus collecting the data of, your current status.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, I see you shaking your head. You're in alignment with this kind of stuff. What jumps out at you as the most helpful that would really get you in with the lean principles?
Yeah. What jumps out at me is like, I guess the way I see projects, building these big complex projects, is kind of like rolling a snowball down a mountain, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're at the very top of the mountain and the project just starts off, you can make adjustments pretty easily, right?
Yeah.
But once you get to the bottom of the mountain, that ball has collected so much snow, it's almost impossible to make any major course corrections. So the approach when you're in this and these kind of environments doing these kind of projects is like Andy alluded to, data and performance driven metrics. You give yourself the power and the ability to create this feedback loop, right?
Oh, yeah.
As you're going along the course. So when you have a good stream of data coming into your fingertips, you can make these slight tiny adjustments along the way to always make sure that snowball is going to land and hit in the right spot once you get to the bottom of the mountain where you want it to go.
That's such a good analogy.
That's the analogy that kind of popped in my head, and that's what performance driven is as you're going, before you get to the end of the line, and understand, oh, we got this big issue, we got this 6-week delay. Well, I can make tiny adjustments along the way, performance driven adjustments along the way to make sure that this project ends right. I can get ahead of issues quicker instead of being way behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, and being able to use data to make those adjustments makes it even more accurate. Chris, do you resonate with the snowball analogy? I'm like, I've never heard it before, and now I'm like, I'll use it for the end of days. Do you feel that?
No, yes, I recently saw the snowball analogy used on culture. It's easy to kind of shift culture and change culture at the beginning, but once the ball's rolling, it's really hard to change direction or change culture. But I think this is so compelling to us, I think, as large general contractors. We do this, we just do it manually. So it goes back to the point of we don't have as many resources. So I don't need to put field engineers out there counting everything in the field anymore. I'm going to send Andy some video footage of my job site from a webcam or from a 360 cam or whatever he tells me I need to give him. And then tomorrow morning, I'm going to have this report, and all my people get to go home with normal time. And it's just, and Andy and companies like BuildDots are bringing this technology to the masses, I hope. That's what I see this going, because as a large general contractor, we have resources to do this. We know that it works, so we put the time and the effort into it to make it work. And now we can make our lives easier, and then other companies can do more of this because it's more available and less resource demanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think from a culture perspective too about changing perceptions as you're at the top of the mountain and the snowball is really small? How do you start a project off saying, we're going to do this differently this go round? That is, you bring up the culture change, Chris, which I think is really important. How do you start the culture differently? Because we've done things the same way for so long. How do you make that change?
It's hard, and it's commitment, and it's so, you're reminding me so much of this conversation that happens in every trailer at the beginning of every job, which goes something like, hey, could you tell me how long you need to do this, or what you're going to need, and how can I help make you successful with the scope of work? Well, why are you asking me all these questions? Aren't you just going to tell me what I have to do, what I have to be
Right.
done? I could, but that wouldn't be very effective because you're better at your job than I am. So how about you help me help you? And so it's a culture of the way we've always done it. And so by committing to doing it differently, you have to convince people over and over again, because we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to regress once in a while. But to make that commitment and to see people recognize that in you, that, oh, he really does want my input. He took my schedule input from the last pull plan and he put it into the project schedule. Wow, that's great. So
Sure.
Just keep
it really goes back to that respect for people tenet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like,
right.
At the very beginning of the project, you're going to do it differently. We're going to think differently. Jeremy, how do you feel about you would step foot onto a project site and say, okay, on this site, we're going to use this methodology called performance-driven construction management. We're going to do things differently. How do you think you would approach that?
I think people in construction, whether it's the staff in the office, workers, they hear a lot of things, right? They hear a lot of things at the beginning of jobs. Hey, we're going to do this differently this time. And a lot of times it doesn't happen. And so I think the way you change culture is, I don't know, you raise your hand if anybody's ever tried to break a habit.
Yeah, right.
You don't do that overnight, right? It takes focus and intentional leadership week in and week out for many weeks just to start to see that shift happen. And just on projects where, I've both started jobs from the very beginning and I've come in the middle and have tried to adjust things. And I think it's that week in and week out, using consistent metrics to measure performance really helps. I've done it both, with the spreadsheet and with the use of better technological tools like this. It's just a matter of how much time it takes, right? Am I going to bed at, 9 o'clock or midnight?
Yeah, right. That's so true. That's so true. And Andy, I know we're on the Lean Construction Institute webinar here. So really trying to, play this in to how all of this relates to Lean, which it really, really does, I think, in every aspect. I know you were moving into a slide that really pulled that together. Can you talk to us a little bit of how performance-driven construction management really ties into those Lean tenets?
Yeah, I think before I just put on to that, I think it's really important to build on what's just been said about the culture and managing change and bringing this thing to life. I think from our perspective, we don't see technology as the only answer, obviously. The most important part here is people, process, and technology combining to create a better answer. And that's the starting point of it. I think it's, we can't do it on our own. It's not just, we certainly don't work in a way until we give you a bit of technology and expect you to magically come up with all the answers and understand what the reports are saying. We go through a fairly detailed hand-holding exercise with that, but because we know we've got to bring people along on the journey and understand what it's all about. So I think that's quite key. And when it comes to the actual tenets themselves, I mean, you just got to love how the two things blend together. To me, it's I was asked initially to talk about like 4 of the tenets, but the whole thing is an ecosystem. A project is an ecosystem. And what we've got here, optimizing the whole, as I said before, getting everybody aligned behind the information, the data, building a holistic team, understanding what we're all doing, setting the goal of what is important on this project, why is it important to the owner, which part of it, how we're going to do it. Those early discussions of putting everything together, so key in every project. And we're just part of that equation. We're just there helping that process. And as part of that, obviously, it's about the building has a purpose. And I think sometimes in construction, we forget that the construction process itself is just a complete inconvenience. It's an inconvenience to the person who wants the building. They just want the building. We can plonk it there today. So it's how do we pull together to maximize generating that value for the end customer so that they can use their building effectively and as efficiently and as quickly as we possibly can, and truly build value in that way, which of course, if you're doing it in the most efficient way as we possibly can, starts to really eliminate waste. And that's, I think there are, from my knowledge of lean, and I'm not as an expert as a number of people in the corner accept that, I think there are 8 principles of eliminating waste within the lean. And it ticks those boxes completely. Understanding your productivity rate, production rate, making sure that people aren't waiting around while trades before are completed. And as I say, if you come back to the wonderful tool of PPC, if somebody's telling you that they're going to do X amount of footage next week and they only tell you that they only actually deliver it half of it, in my previous role as group chief exec, how do I rely on that project team to tell me when they're going to finish the whole project if they can't tell me what they're going to do next week? And if you then start to magnify that up into the project itself, then you start to go, how do we understand? How does each trade contractor understand when and where he's going to distribute his resources? And we are full of specialist contractors now, and they're working on multiple projects. Now, how do they manage their own resource levels if they don't know which project is going to be working when? And in my former life, we had an off-site manufacturing company. The biggest issue we had was not knowing when we were due to be delivered to the GC, because that was too fluid. And it's efficiency of resources comes down to predictability, and that's one of the key things. So even if we don't fundamentally change what's going on the project in terms of more resources, but are more consistent in understanding what is going to be delivered next week, that to me is a huge way of eliminating waste. Processes, improving the processes. With systems like this, they need to be embedded with your processes to provide you with the best information, to ensure that you get the right resources, be it labour and materials to site at the right time in the most efficient way, distributing those materials, reducing the defects. Obviously, this creates a tool which helps reduce those defects. I'd say I can go on with regard to the waste element. And focusing on the flow and how this all pulls together and making sure we get the sequencing right. That is essential. We see so much inconsistency of productivity rates. That's the biggest bit of data that we see. We do not see trades delivering 1,000 square feet week in, week out. We see 100 one week, 1,500 the following week, 200 the following week. And those bring together huge numbers of questions as to why that's occurring, how that's occurring. And understanding right way back into the beginning of the curve, what productivity rate were we expecting? Because when we analyze the schedule in the first place, the schedules that the GCs are creating are inconsistent as well. And all of this creates continuous improvement. Obviously, the more we talk about it, the more we feed back in. And as I think everybody's just talked on the call, I think, there is a huge stress in this industry. People work ridiculously long hours. I was almost embarrassed by teams we had. I was very proud, but almost embarrassed by the teams we had on projects. The hours and the commitment they put in. People drive a long way to the field site, to the trailer to get to work. They put in ridiculously long hours. They work evenings and weekends. And how can we actually say that's respecting people if we're expecting so much for them? And we've got to look after people's, not just their safety nowadays, but their health and their mental well-being. All of those need to come into play. And we have to be responsible. And we have to make this industry so appealing for the next generations to come into. Because we need them. You know, it is fundamentally key to everything we do in society to have buildings being created. So I think, yeah, everything we do, everything Lean is trying to do is just completely aligned here, and I love it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, you know, to me, the optimizing of the whole is such an important piece, and, you know, really where getting data and getting everybody on the same page using data is like really can make the biggest impact. I see you shaking your head, Kyle. What are your thoughts on where you feel like this data-driven AI approach could really make a difference in Lean?
Yeah, I think yeah, Andy was getting me fired up at the end of that. It really improves like the big three, which is optimizing the whole, continuous improvement, and focusing on flow. I think the AI and your data stream really emphasizes those three. Um, and that I think is the big opportunity there. Andy touched on it. There's a new generation coming in. You know, it hurts me to see people 70 plus hours on a job site. Let's offload some of this stuff to AI. Let's offload some of this admin to technology so that we can focus less on the administration of the project and more on the strategy, more on the, you know, more being strategic leaders and less administrative managers. That's what I hope to see the industry go to, and that's what I think Lean and AI can really help us. And also that's going to help the next generation too. They're going to love that. I think, you know, we don't need
Yeah.
to be working these long hours on these tough, brutal projects.
Yeah,
This is fun. We need to pace ourselves and not burn out. And
absolutely.
there's a big opportunity there with AI.
Absolutely. I think the data, I say this all the time, but it shows you smoke before there's fire. And like, God, Chris, how much time do we spend putting out fires every single day? And then these flaming balls of nonsense that come flying through the window every day, right? That you're like, oh my God, why didn't I see this coming? And the idea of having some sort of data that starts to you see all these things before the human eye can see them. How appealing is that to you?
Oh yeah, no, I think I'm going to borrow Fleming balls of nonsense, by the way. But
I usually say flaming balls is something else, but for the audience today,
PG show here. But yes, I think I touched on it a little bit, but just yes, it's exciting to us because it means we can do what we believe works and have tried to do and get more efficient at doing over the years more easily. And then it's also now should be more available to trade partners and contractors, general contractors who don't have the same staff allocated to a specific project. So that data that takes people to collect now can now be collected a different way and analyzed. And then we can come in and see the information, and then we can meet with our team. And then we're having collaborative discussions over this is what the data is telling us. You know, if you think this data is wrong somehow, then let's go tweak the program, or let's go ask how this comes out and gets calculated. But it appears this is the truth. This is
that's right
of what's going on our project. So now let's all go figure out how to make it better, and celebrate wins at the same time. I mean, you got to have some good, you know, you go say, hey, we crossed a new benchmark. We've broken the new record.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We found the solution to the problem. Like, let's have a celebration about it rather than it being a beatdown all the time, right? Of everybody, I think. I think owners included, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, owners included. And I think, Jeremy, you know, can you kind of talk about that continuous improvement, optimizing the whole when it comes to spreading this data, sharing this data with our owners, right? You have a lot of owners on the call today. How do you see this collaboration working together and really utilizing the data to be having better conversations with our owners and our trade partners and our design firms?
Yeah, I think sometimes we find it challenging on, you know, we do collect a lot of data, and how do we share the data in a way where it's valuable to the clients we work with? And, you know, from experimenting on projects, I think it takes a lot, different clients do have different interests, but as a whole, I think that clients are mostly interested in how are the decisions that we're making or sometimes not making affecting the project, and how can we do better, as a client. Because I think most people, it gets communicated in different ways, but I think that's what most people's interest really is, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to see the project succeed. And I think sometimes it's difficult for people who don't do construction day in and day out to figure out how do their actions relate to what's going on site.
Right. No, I think that's a really good point. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left into the webinar, and this was a really long webinar that we gave ourselves time for. So I do kind of want to open it up for Q&A if there's questions that have come in. We did have one that came in, and is anybody tracking variances? And if they are being prevented in the future? Chris, I see you nodding your head. Are you tracking variances?
Yeah, and I'm I work for Hensel Phelps, offices across the country, different phases of our lean journey along the way. My region, Southwest region, was probably the first to have a major client to say, let's do it this way. We said, hey, we've been doing it this way, but you're calling it something different. But there's some new stuff here. There's some things we can learn from. Let's all get on this journey. So when I say we, I mean me and the people in this part of the country.
Right.
So yes, we track variance, and I'm glad the question was asked, because that might be, it's top two probably metrics, because there's stereotypical construction answers, and we all know number one is get more people. And so when you study what actually is causing not to hit your commitment, and you categorize those into variance categories, then you start to see the trends on which variance types are the real impacts on your project, and you go focus your energy on the things that make a difference. You don't focus your energy on the one-off variance category. The one that has 10 or 20 or 30% of your variances are the ones you want to go spend your time on. I love variance tracking. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy, you're shaking your head too. You have additional thoughts on that about tracking variances?
Yeah, I think, as an example, on one project, we track variance every week. And I think it's important for the team to both track the variance and take action. As an example, you kind of get into the rhythm sometimes of kind of hitting the same topics or the same areas each meeting. And we realized after a couple of weeks, like, wait a second, we've been talking about this particular controls contractor that's derailing the job. Let's change things up. So the next meeting, we're like, hey, you're coming in person. We're going to talk about what's going on site. This variance has been affecting the job for a couple of weeks now, and it's not headed in a good direction. And, we started to right the ship there. And so sometimes you not only have to track it, but figure out creative ways to take action in order to make a difference on the project.
Yeah. Anything to add, Kyle, on that?
No, big fan of variance tracking as well. I guess the only thing I would add is it gives you the ability to address root cause. You're not looking at symptoms. You can look at the root cause to make a long-term improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. So as other questions are coming in, let me just ask, how could closer integration of all parties involved in the construction process, from suppliers to trade partners, impact the project outcomes, especially in terms of reducing waste and optimizing the whole? I think, Jeremy, you touched on that, a little bit about working together, optimizing the whole. Chris, what are your thoughts as the superintendent who's really trying to make all these parts and pieces move on site? How do you feel like that close integration of parties and working from the same sheet of music can really help with that elimination of waste?
Well, it's the deal breaker. Okay, so years ago, we still thought that, as long as I get done, that's good. And so I would do whatever I want to do to get for me to be successful. And I don't care if you guys are successful. And then eventually you start to learn that my being successful doesn't necessarily A, translate to project success, and B, I might not actually be being successful just because I'm focused on what I want and what I need. So by getting everybody on the same page with the collaborative nature and the optimization of the whole, people start to do give and takes. People start to help each other out. I think it was Jeremy was talking about an IFOA contract. I mean, you'll much more likely see somebody say, okay, you guys aren't, something's going on. Somebody got the flu and the crew got sick, and I need to go over there and help that team because it helps me, because my profits are tied up with their profit. But even on the traditional contracting methods, you see that collaboration bring benefits.
Sure.
And I think we all track early as a miss in PPC. So why is my being done early a bad thing? Well, because Joe was planning on coming Thursday, and now you're done on Tuesday, and I've lost Wednesday.
That's right.
So you have to teach people about some of these differences and thinking and the mentality. But yes, you ultimately see a huge elimination of waste the more you can collaborate, and the broader you can collaborate, cast that net of collaboration up and down the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, I have a question that's come in for you. How can AI support data dealing with variances? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, completely, all the time. I mean, it's what we're trying to get to is the cause, whatever causes variance. So constantly getting down into the detail, looking at productivity rates, predictions made, saying why is somebody returning to an area, why are there loose ends, why are productivity rates and prediction rates completely out of place. It's all about that level of information that's absolutely key. And it's, we highlight, I was literally just with our customer success team before, we've just sat with a customer today with the variance report. And it's literally just saying, big question marks, obviously, as to understanding why these are in play. Yeah, key to us, key to the project, and key metrics. So
I have another question.
Add on a bit about the question you asked Chris about that whole bring it together. These are ecosystem systems now, and get the owners, especially if they're doing repeat projects, to understand, the nuances, the problems that we have as an industry, the problems we have in the start, and then get trade partners engaged earlier so that they can actually see some of this data, understand why their production rates are all over the place. Then we can start to eliminating this waste. And those of us who've been involved in rollout programs in retail, retail stores or fabs today, hospitals, we do a lot with hospitals, which are trying to mirror the same construction principles. For them, they're really exciting schemes. Feedback is continuous learning process.
So an interesting question has come in, because it's funny, I feel like I talk about AI all day, every day, and I think maybe we missed talking about AI so much on this call, because I think what's the biggest takeaway for AI? The team spoke a lot on performance-driven data, but I'm not sure I caught what AI could be used for, except that it's exciting and that AI could be used. So what do we feel like the biggest takeaway is from AI here, Kyle? I feel like, you're really driving, and I know Leighton's really driving into the use of AI. Talk to me a little bit about that.
What is the most exciting kind of up and coming thing for AI?
Well, what's the biggest takeaway? I think the question is, what's the biggest takeaway for AI? I think is the takeaway that it's here, we can use it. It's not just for fun, it's for data. Like, those would be my takeaways, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, what's that biggest takeaway for AI? Because I think AI is the underlying factor of all of this data that we're talking about. But what do you feel like is the biggest takeaway related to AI?
Related to AI, I think it's certainly here. It's making its way into our industry, and into our processes and our workflows. And it's gonna be a huge tool for, I think, number one, data. Yeah, your information, taking the information that's happening on our job sites and and bringing it, organizing it for us, generating it for us, and putting it into nice dashboards that we can look at and, like I said, do less administration and more strategic thinking. I think that is from my perspective, the number one takeaway for AI. It's to offload just some of the paperwork and some of the heavy manual stuff that we're used to in the industry. I think right now we're here at about constructions. I say it's 10% data, 90% documents. That's what the current state is. And I think that number will eventually, hopefully, flip 90% data, 10% documents.
Yeah.
That is performance driven.
As we say in the South, from your mouth to God's ears. Let's hope that the industry gets there. Eileen, I think you had a comment.
I do have a couple of comments. The first is I just want to remind everybody that LCI as an organization is software agnostic. So if you have any questions about the software that BuildDots has, please contact them directly. They will be able to answer any questions that you have. I also wanted to let everyone know that now, as we're going through Q&A, is the time for the plus delta. Go ahead and put that feedback in the questions box for those of you who are not familiar with the term. Pluses are things you thought added value to the presentation, and deltas are things you think we should change to add more value to the presentation. Everyone on the webinar has mentioned continuous improvement more than once. We want to make sure that we improve our offerings to make them what it is that you want to hear about. So go ahead and put those plus deltas into the questions box. Thanks, Jessica.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eileen. And another question that came in was, how is AI being used to develop bid schedules? And that's not something that I'm familiar with. Is anybody using AI to develop bid schedules?
No.
Not to date.
I could do a bit
Not really.
stuff on AI, just for a bit of context.
It's a little hard to hear you, Andy. Could you come a little?
Andy, you have a little background. Can you scoot up a little closer to your microphone, please? Or speak up a little louder? Thank you.
Is that a bit better?
Yes.
Good. So AI, we talked about, yes, it's fuzzy, of course it is. But the key really about AI is, and one of the questions that was posed earlier was, how much data do you have as a panel? Lightly, and it was modestly or something that, actually that's wrong. We have more data than we know what to do with. And actually, you think about your own organizations, how much time is spent within your organization creating the data. The creation that we do, we put a huge amount of man hours and resources into creating data. Excel is still the #1 data creating tool that we use. You think about all the reporting you do internally, externally, about how your project's going on, how it's performing financially, how we're doing against the program, that and all of those areas can be, it can move into that way. When it comes to bidding, there are, we're starting to see AI coming into the bidding process. There are systems out there that are capable of scanning drawings, scanning financial documents, scanning specifications, and actually doing gap analysis. So actually looking at where there's gaps between what the schedule says and what the drawings say, so you actually don't miss something key in your project. That technology is starting to come about in the system. It also does automatic inquiries out to your trade contractors and comparisons of their prices and everything else. So, we are moving in an exciting way. As Eileen said, our business will continue to develop additional different tools using AI, which will widen the scope. But it's here to stay.
May I suggest something that if you are not speaking, if you could mute yourselves, we believe the background noise is coming from one of the panelists. I would appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, as we just asked you all to mute, I'm going to ask each one of you to unmute as you're talking to kind of give a 45-second wrap up of what your thoughts are on the topic today and everything that we've discussed, and really this AI-driven performance construction management, right? AI-driven data. How does this affect our job sites? And just to give, 45 seconds wrap up, what are your thoughts? What advice would you give to the panelists to use AI and this performance-driven methodology in order to drive forward lean construction principles? Chris, we'll start with you.
I would say if you're not doing it, if you are doing it now, you're excited because this is what we all said it. We're doing this with, we can do more with less. So we have the ability to get the data and process the data without putting as many human resources to it. If you're not yet using this performance-driven methodology, then it's now more accessible and you don't need to hire more staff, and you didn't need to price yourself out of your scope because you had to add staff to do that, because now you can do it with some AI. So I think it's exciting for us because we believe it works. We've used it ourselves all the way from big chief tablets and crayons all the way up to the advent of AI. So hopefully that continues for everybody, and we'll see everybody doing this more often.
Amazing. Thanks, Chris. How about you, Jeremy? Skanska hasn't yet jumped into the AI progress tracking, data-driven world yet. So curious your thoughts on how you feel about all this.
I think that, maybe just to go back to where I started at the beginning of my introduction, I think our business has a lot of room to improve with employees' mental health, feeling valued, and happiness. And so on a couple of projects recently, I was kind of reminded this from a new perspective, where the team was tackling challenges and coming up with new ways to measure, how we're doing and act on things proactively. And our limitation there was we were gathering a lot of data, but just figuring out how to process that. Like, for example, we realized, hey, really a lot of what we do, a lot of the waste that it comes out of rework. And so without going off on a tangent, the limitation there came down to the people's time to kind of collect and analyze the data. And so I'm pretty excited about how AI is advancing to help teams in this way, because I think that can help one of our big limitations, which we talked about before, was resources.
Amazing. I totally agree. Oh, look, my icon, my little bubbles are popping up. Sorry about that. Kyle, what are your wrap-up thoughts?
To wrap up, I guess I would just encourage the audience to start playing around with some of these metrics. If you're not using them already, pick a half dozen or so metrics you want to focus in on. Whether if you're not doing it, do it manually, and if not, to make it better and more efficient, start looking at more technologies to do some of that work for you, whether it's pull planning or it's a progress tracking tool like Build Dots. I think it's an excellent opportunity. Anytime that we focus on the underlying behavior of your systems and your project, you're going to get a competitive advantage, and you're going to deliver with more predictability. I think that's fair to say. So I'm excited about that their AI is growing in this industry. It will become more of a norm. So get ahead of it now, research these tools and processes, and make it part of your everyday, because it's here to help and here to make this more fun and exciting.
Love it. Love it. Andy, final thoughts from you, wrapping up on performance-driven construction management and this concept of AI.
Oh, I feel so encouraged having had this panel today. I think, started with the fact that the business model is broken, and that, I'm really keen that we look to ways to help this amazing industry, because it is absolutely incredible, and the people are incredible. And you know, we've got a level of that. And I think if we can embrace, firstly, let's be real, let's embrace lean. You know, the principles of lean are fantastic. So let's embrace that. And all we're doing is we're taking it to the next level. You know, it's lean on steroids. You know,
that's right.
What we're trying to create here. It's giving you information in a format that you can make more informed, better decisions, and your people can go home safely, good mental health, enjoy life, get work-life balance, and we perform as an industry. And you know, if I can retire on that basis, then I'm a very, very happy man.
And with that, Eileen, I'm passing it over to you exactly on time. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, technology. Elsie, I would like to thank all of you for attending the webinar today, our esteemed panel for presenting. We hope to see you on our next webinar soon. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.